to our second video in our series aimed at people building their first PC or upgrading their own PC on their own for the first time. This time we're going to be focusing on power supplies, which are an often overlooked uh, part of your computer, which is strange because it's quite essential and you do need a good one to avoid problems in the future and also to leave you room for upgrades. No, there's several important factors when you choose a power supply. Most people don't really pay much attention to it because it's not as flashy and as it's not deemed as essential to have a good one often as, for example, a processor or a graphics card. But you do need one that satisfies your needs, and that goes mostly in three different areas, which I will address individually. Now, the first area that you have to consider is if you want a modular power supply or a non-modular power supply. There's also partially modular, but as a rule of thumb, I'll just want to sort them in on those two categories. Uh, the non-modular one basically means that all the wires that come from the power supply towards the components are permanently attached to a power supply. So if, for example, you do not need a Molex connector at all because your PC does not require one, or your parts don't require one, you're stuck with having it there anyway. A modular power supply means that you can plug out or plug in components at will, and you can just have the ones that you need plugged in and the others just stored safely in the box somewhere and not cluttering your PC and forcing you to have cables there that are not really necessary, which makes it look messy, which is especially important for people with glass or acrylic panels on the side, letting a view of the computer inside. As an example, this would be a non-modular PSU because as you can see all the cables are attached. You cannot unattach a cable or two if you don't need them. And this would be a modular PSU because you just attach whatever you need and whatever you don't need, you just don't. Now, this is the example of a semi-modular PSU because some cables are attached by default, and those are usually the cables that you will require anyway because it's the motherboard power, the PSU power, that sort of thing, and for everything else you can choose to plug them in or not as you require, and whatever you don't require you don't have to plug in. As a rule of thumb, if you are going to have a PC that has a glass or acrylic panel, or if you just don't want too many wires cluttering the inside of your PC to have a better airflow, I would recommend going for a modular or semi-modular. Otherwise, the non-modular ones are cheap, but personally I would always recommend a modular or semi-modular because even if you don't let your computer be seen on the inside, it is still possibly blocking airflow and making it more difficult to have a neat cable management to have room for everything without everything being basically a rat's nest. Now, the second factor that you have to consider when deciding on a power supply are the pins. Now, usually if you go for a bit of a better model or a more premium model, you will have a variety of cables included, but if you go for a more budget version, you have to keep in mind what cables you actually need for your components. Does your motherboard use a 20-pin connector or 24-pin connector? Does your graphics card use a 6-pin, an 8-pin, multiple? You have to keep all of that in mind and make sure that your power supply comes with the required cables. Otherwise, it can be difficult to find the correct cables, and that's if there are even any, because if it's a non-modular, then you're a bit out of luck and you are stuck with the cables that come with it to begin with. On most power supplies that are sold these days, you'll have something like this. The cables for your PSU will have a 6-pin and then a second little 2-pin connector on the side that you can plug in if needed, and if not needed you can just leave them connected. And this is a lot handier because that means that it will be compatible to any graphics card that you might have, and you don't have to worry when upgrading, is it gonna fit with my PSU or not. The same story goes for the motherboard connectors. Most power supplies these days have a 20-pin connector, as you can see, and then another 4 pins on the side in case you need 24, which most graphics cards require these days anyway. So it makes it easy to plan upgrades like that because and compatibility because you don't have to worry much about it. But in any case, just to be sure, it's very easy to check what cables your power supply comes with. I would check just to be completely certain that it will be a good fit to your components. The third factor is how much power your PSU can actually supply. Now, there's the standard voltage that you can get out of it. That will be listed on the power supply, but probably on the name, because well, that's one of the more important factors. The 550 watts, 450, 650, all the way up to 1500 watts or 1800 for the most demanding computers out there. But in any case, there you have that factor, and you also have to keep in mind the 80 plus certification that some power supplies have. Now, the 80 plus certification is basically a measure of how efficient your power supply is and how much energy gets wasted as heat as opposed to as provided energy. And what it means is if it's an 80 plus, it means that 80% of the power is actually provided. The other 20% are basically radiated as heat because some energy will always be lost in such devices. And you have several levels of certification from bronze, silver, gold, platinum, you name it, titanium, I believe. And basically, the higher, the better that certification is, the less energy is wasted and the more efficient your power supply is, and also the less energy bill you're gonna have to pay because less energy is wasted. But that is, it's not going to be a massive factor. It's not gonna make cut your cost of running a computer in half or anything. But anyway, usually higher certified power supplies are a bit higher quality ones as well. So if you have the budget, it's always worth going for a bit of a better one, and you do get some of your money back anyway with the increased efficiency. Now, as far as the voltage goes, that depends completely in your components. Now, there's many calculators out there that you can use to calculate what you're going to need. For the average user, you're probably going to land on the 550 to 650 watts needed at most. But you might want to leave some room for upgrade. And to calculate exactly what you need, I have kind of dug out this handy website that lets you calculate what you need. Now we'll just show you. Now this website is called outervision.com, power supply calculator, as you can see. It's a collaboration between Outervision and Thermaltake, and all it does is it helps you calculate how much your computer actually needs to function. I will set it to the basic settings just to keep it a bit more simple. Otherwise, you have to select a lot of models and a lot of stuff. So let's say that you have a desktop and you want to run it 8 hours a day, and you are going to play 4 hours a day in the evening if you're a gamer. Let's say now you will have one CPU, and let's say that you have a 770K. Just select whatever CPU you use. Let us say that you also have two 8 modules of DDR4, and let's assume that you have a GTX 1070 Ti. Let's go. This is not the highest model available, but it's just to have a bit of an idea for the let's say middle user, not full-on PC enthusiast who get an 80 Ti or an 870K, but it gives you a good idea for the what most people will need. Let's say that you have two hard drives at 7.2K RPM, and let us say that you have one SSD under 500 gigabytes. You probably also have a CD drive, and your screen will most likely have its own power supply. But so let's just keep that blank, and let's calculate how much power supply is recommended. See, as you can see, it recommends you to have 511. even though your actual energy usage is 461 watts. Now, this is because, like I said, some energy gets wasted, and it is also because when you're running your computer at full load, it might peak above this 461 for short periods of time. And if it does peak, and if your power supply can't provide it, then that's a problem then, and you have to also account for that. Now, what I personally would do is I would run my expected parts through this calculator, and I would take what it comes here, and this will probably tell you, well, I'll get the 550 watt power supply. I will get the 650, to be honest. Uh, if you are feeling like you might do a series upgrade, like, oh, I'm gonna get 990K i9, and I'm gonna get RTX 2080 Ti or something, then I would go higher. I would get a 750 or higher. So yeah, it kind of depends on what you expect to upgrade in the future. But yes, I would go higher, at least 100 watts higher than what is recommended, just to be sure that you have some room to upgrade in the future, that you can plug in some another hard drive, or you can upgrade your CPU or your graphics card, and then you don't have to worry about the power supply at all, unless it's malfunctioning, of course. No, those were the biggest three factors when picking a PSU, in my opinion. There's always other factors, like obviously the price. The higher the wattage on it, the more you're going to pay. Uh, if you're going to want some fancy stuff like LED lights and whatnot, you're also going to have to pay. There's other small factors, like for example, power supplies that have fans, but you can turn them on a silent mode, which means that the fan will not function at all unless the power supply is getting too hot and under load. That's going to make your PC be a bit more silent. There's all sorts of things out there. There's semi-passive cooling. That means that the power supply will try to radiate the heat without enabling the fan. Again, makes your PC a bit cooler. And there's all of that. And of course, if you get the module one, you're gonna pay a little bit more. So that's all things to take in consideration. Some of those costs are worth it. I consider the modular power supply to be worth it. And in my case, since I have a custom case built inside my desk, I considered having the idle fan mode also to be worth it. For example, my fan never spins at all. Even when I'm gaming or whatever, it's not spinning because I have enough cooling and it doesn't need to. Uh, so yeah, there's small things that you might want. They're nice to have. There's other things that you might not care about, like the LED lights. I personally don't care for the LED lights on the PSU, and there's not many that have it. So it's all up to you. So my advice is that you make sure that the cables are compatible. They most likely will, because it's at this point it's pretty universal. You pick a brand that is known and reputable, like Seasonic, for example. There's plenty of brands out there that are like high quality power supplies, because you don't want to have a crappy unknown brand one that's gonna catch on fire or something. Make sure that you get a good one like EVGA, Seasonic, you name it. There's at least some 6, 7 very good brands of it. With a little bit of research, you'll find them easily. You calculate how much power you're actually going to need. You overshoot it a little bit by 150-ish watts, so you are safe for the future. And yeah, that's about it. I hope this has helped you with your choice of power supply, and I hope that your PC will make good use of it, and that you're going to have a whole lot of fun with it. I'm Attic PC Guy. I'll see you next time, and have fun.